Welcome to another real-time strategy top 10 list. This one is a little different. This is my top 10 most wanted units in Total War Warhammer 3. In order to make this list, I am working on a few guesses on what the new factions will be. Following on from the second game's inclusion of 4 more races, and the first installment starting with 4 races total, I believe the third installment will follow this pattern. The 4 races being Ogre Kingdoms, Chaos Demons, Chaos Dwarves, and Dogs of War. Many may think Kislev, but I don't think that's a big enough faction to be a starting race in a new game, more like a DLC edition. So these are my 4. There are many interesting, exciting, scary and unique units that each of these factions can own and command, so picking 10 will be tricky, but these 10 will be the most wanted units in the game, for me. I will be discussing why I think these units are the most wanted, and we'll be going into the details of how each might work in the game, their history, and their relation to their owned factions. With that said, I hope you enjoy this video, and maybe learn something about the possible new units in the third game. Your most wanted units may differ from mine, so why not leave yours down below? As the time of this video, my competition to win a Karl Franz medal hand painted by myself is still ongoing until the end of October, so if you're interested in winning this unique prize, check out the competition link in the description below. It's worth your time, I promise. So let's get to it. Number 10. Lumping Kroops Fighting Cocks. Now, number 10 is a bit of a silly one, but these guys are halflings, and bowman halflings at that. They would be for the Dogs of War faction, and would be quite an effective ranged unit, but obviously a bit of a lower tier one. There's also some halflings that have a catapult, which is pretty interesting, I'll say that. They are a regiment of renown, and Lumping Kroop himself is quite an interesting character, so seeing him in the game in some form or another would be quite fun. Again, just a silly one at number 10, because I thought that these guys should have their time to shine. Number 9. Ogre Leadbelchers. At number 9 are the Ogre Leadbelchers, the standard ranged unit for any Ogre Kingdom's army. Except, like other armies who carry bows, crossbows, slings or blowpipes, these units carry whole cannons as their ranged weapon. Usually coming in a unit of 4, this heavy-hitting ranged unit could devastate enemy lines early on. Obviously, the main flaw would be the inaccurate nature of an ogre carrying a cannon, so it would always be a guess where the cannonball will land. Having mobile cannons as your main ranged unit is such a unique idea that is only available in a steam tank or gyrocopters currently. Until Vampire Coasts come out, of course. But they would be bulky in melee also, swinging their cannons around like a giant swings a club. I love this unit. It's definitely well deserved at number 9. Number 8. Kadai Destroyers. A unit for the Chaos Dwarves, this is essentially an armoured Balrog. Kadai Destroyers would be the heavy shock troops for the Chaos Dwarves. They are massive constructs created in the form of mighty warriors, beasts or bulls. They are huge and covered in flame and magma. They are near-mindless elemental forces of destruction, ones that would be devastating in the game. They would be late tier units, to fit with their lore, which states that only the greatest dwarven sorcerers can actually forge them. There could even be different versions of them, due to some Chaos Dwarf sorcerers giving them wings infused with magic and fire. Imagine seeing these monsters on the battlefield, spreading fire as they go. Would be a good excuse to reuse Attila's fire mechanics, no? A very cool unit that definitely had to be on this list somewhere. Number 7. Blight Kings. The elite foot infantry of the Chaos God Nurgle. Blight Kings are heavy, slow-moving, bulky and tanky infantry with poison-causing weapons. They would be a brick wall for an army to get through. This unit looks great, and are some of my favourite models Games Workshop has ever put out. Their variety in how they look is mostly this cause, but it's also how scary they are to come across. Their speed would be their downfall, but if you got them in combat or made them the front line of your shield wall, they would be unstoppable. They would be in a small unit of 12, maybe like the current Chaos aspiring champions. They would be very expensive, and you would have to have the Nurgle allegiance to have them. Check out my top 5 most wanted factions in Total Warhammer 3 for more on how that would work. On the tabletop, like Plague Bearers, they have a swarm of flies constantly around them, which allows them to make a better save against missile damage. To show this in the game, the unit could have an automatic ward save, or a buff against missile damage. A very cool unit that definitely needs to be part of the game. Number 6. Bull Centaurs. Imagine a centaur, now imagine that twice as big, and with the body of a bull instead of a horse, and you have the Chaos Dwarves' most terrifying cavalry. These guys make the centaurs look pitiful. They would work pretty much like dragon ogres, but have a much harder and faster charge, heavily armoured, and be a lot tankier. They are entrusted with the most dangerous tasks in the lore, which make them some of the most elite of their warriors. They are cruel and arrogant, which could be shown in their high morale or unbreakable attributes. These guys speak for themselves in how cool they are, and they certainly needed a place on this list if Chaos Dwarves are to be included in the future. The battlefield would shake as these guys approached, and the Chaos Dwarf army would be much less without their presence. Number 5. Perazzo's Lost Legion. The second and final Dogs of War unit that appears on this list, and for a very specific reason. From my knowledge, these are the only pikemen in the Warhammer world ever referenced or in an army, or even given models. The closest thing we have to pikemen in the Warhammer game is currently spearmen, or maybe halberdier units across the board. Imagine if the only pikemen unit was this Dogs of War unit you have to pay to recruit into your army. They will be invaluable against cavalry-focused armies and would really prove useful in protecting your flanks. They look amazing, and Perazzo himself has some interesting history. This would be a great unit to include into the third game, just for its gameplay impact on its own. And it would be great to see some pikemen in the game. Number 4. The Ogre Stonehorn or Thundertusk. 2 of my favourite models ever made, and one that I would love to see in the game. Imagine a Stegodon, now, double the size and stick some ogres on top of it instead. That's the Stonehorn and Thundertusk. I've included both of the units into one because the Games Workshop model comes as both in one box, and I couldn't decide which I liked better, so they both made it to number 4. They would be a huge threat on the battlefield and would literally shake the ground as they approach the enemy lines. The Thundertusk would give a mammoth a run for its money in its bulk and damage in melee, especially with the 2 ogres on top, throwing bear traps and spears into the enemy infantry. It has an icy breath attack, which would work a lot like the regiments of renowned Hydra for the Dark Elves. The Stonehorn would be like getting charged at by a train. Its charge bonus and damage would be the best in the game, and would be faster than the Thundertusk. An outlier on the field, skirmishing from afar with its ogre hunter on top shooting his ballista-sized crossbow, waiting for the perfect chance to charge and cause massive damage. These 2 units are so cool, so thematic, and so key to the ogre roster on the tabletop that they would have to be included in the game. It would be tragic if these weren't shown at all, which is why they are my number 4. Number 3. The Dreadquake Mortar. My last Chaos Dwarf entry on this list, it had to be my favourite one of theirs, and one that I would love to see on the battlefield. With the Vampire Coast recently announced, with their roster revealed, the giant best cannon they would have would pale in comparison to this monster of a machine. Dreadquake mortars are amongst the largest and most effective of all the mighty siege machines deployed by the Chaos Dwarves. The Dreadquake's deadly projectiles are fired by steam pressure that is generated by a boiler and contained within a pressure vessel, conventional gunpowder being far too dangerous given the volatility of the Dreadquake's unique and powerful shells. They take a while to reload, which of course would be reflected in the game, but when they fire, they would have a huge impact. The Dreadquake's shells are a secret construction whose arcana is the sole preserve of the Chaos Dwarf sorcerers and prophets of Hashut. When fired from the Dreadquake, they burst into a roaring blood-red light, and when they strike they explode, shattering buildings apart and smashing into the ground like a hammer blow from the gods, bleeding crimson energy from the wounded earth. These shells take the form of metal spheres and are so heavy and unwieldy that the ogre commonly forms part of the machine's crew in order to speed up the loading. Now imagine this thing in the game. Late tier, of course, but it would be so fun and so interesting to have. If they have included this, please make the entire map shake when the blast hits the ground, CA. This is essentially the equivalent of firing an atom bomb at your enemy. I want to see this thing used against a swarm of Skaven. Number 2. Any Greater Demon. Number 2 on my list is Any Greater Demon for the Demons of Chaos. These hulking, colourful, terrifying monsters and malign demigods are the end of all demon armies. Bloodthirsters are my personal favourite, but the Great Unclean ones are second. But I couldn't just pick one over the others, because they all need to be in the game. They are such an important part of their roster that it would be a shame if these guys weren't used in some way. There's so much variety in them. The Bloodthirster can obliterate anything in its path. The Great Unclean One can outlast anything and spread disease as he moves, perhaps causing poison. The Lord of Change, much like Sarthoriel, will be master casters and can fly. And finally, the Keeper of Secrets would seduce the enemy and weaken them to such an extent for her to cleave anything in 2 seconds. Or worse, turn them against their brothers. These demons would have an incredible impact on the game, and are all so unique and interesting that they need to be added if demons are, and they definitely deserve number 2. Number 1. Ogre Manhunters. At number 1 comes my most wanted unit in Total War Warhammer 3, Ogre Manhunters for the Ogre Kingdoms. This unit has the coolest lore, the most variety per model, and has a great opportunity to work across 2 separate factions, Ogre Kingdoms and Dogs of War. Ogre Manhunters are ogres who have become mercenaries for hire. They travel across the world in search for their next contract. From the jungles of Lustria to the far edges of Nippon, these ogres have fought, eaten and survived what many others could only dream of. They are essentially the backpacker of the old world, except they sell their skills and services to the highest bidder. What's quite cool thematically though, is some ogres love some of the places they have visited so much, they translate that with what they wear and how they fight. This leads to ninja ogres, pirate ogres, Arabian ogres, and even a lady ogre with a rolling pin. They would be an elite tier unit and would be the Black Orc of the ogre roster, but would have special abilities based on where they have been. Arabian ogres would get a buff in sandy climates, ninja ogres would have smoke bombs, pirate ogres would allow a bombardment on the map from his nearby ship. Endless possibilities, and one that would bring so much variety to the game. Which is why these guys are my number 1. And that's my list. Thank you for watching, and I hope you share what your most wanted units in Total War Warhammer 3 would be in the comments below. Remember that I've got my competition still going, and if you would like to join, just click on the link in the description and it will take you to the right video. I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you next time.